Hello, and welcome to today's webcast. The new year is off and running, and so is Couchbase, with some updates to our user interface. Couchbase has made a resolution to make Capella more developer-centric, so our team will continue to make improvements in the developer experience. This is just showing you some of those improvements so far. If you have any issues with your sound or your video, please just try to refresh a couple of times and see if that helps. If you would like to chat, please do. There's a window to the right. Feel free to ask questions at any time. Questions will likely be addressed towards the end of the tour. And please look at our docs section. Check out our trial if you're not familiar with Capella already. And you can also test it out in the developer playground. We'll be sending out an on-demand version of this webcast in about 24 hours, so look for that in your email inbox as well. And with that, I turn it over to Matthew Groves, Product Marketing Manager at Couchbase, to lead the tour.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. So I'm going to give you a very quick emphasis on quick tour of Couchbase Capella today. Capella's had recently a facelift in the UI. I'm going to highlight what's new in this new UI. It's not just a redesign, there's some new features as well. If you're new to Couchbase, I'll also be covering some of the features that make Couchbase a unique and useful NoSQL document database. So if you have questions, hit that Q&A tab over there. I'll get to those towards the end of the session. And the recording will be available after the session as well. You'll get that email that she just mentioned. So, all right, let's get started. So I've got no slides to show you. It's a live demo, so things can go wrong. Fingers crossed they won't, but just keep that in mind. So we're going to start here at the sign-in page. And some things to point out here: if you don't yet have a Capella account, you can hit the try for free link right here to start a 30-day trial. No credit card needed for that. I've already done that. I'm not going to make you sit through the process of me signing up and waiting for the cluster to be provisioned and things like that. One thing I want to point out, the sign-in page here, is this new button here at the bottom, use single sign-on. So many people were asking if they could use single sign-on with Capella. Their organization uses some single sign-on provider, so now that's available with Capella. I'm not going to use that today, but I just wanted to point that one out. And in general, as we go on here, notice the UI changes are trying to be more developer-centric. There's a lot of GitHub influence. If you're familiar with GitHub and the web UI of GitHub, that was kind of one of the inspirations for some of these changes. So let's go ahead and get signed in and get on with the tour. All right, so here we are at the start page. This is kind of the main hub of the trial. Now, I already created the trial account. So when I log in, I get shown this start page for the trial cluster up here. Now you can have multiple clusters in Capella, but for trial, just have the one trial cluster. Now this getting started hub here is all new, and this will help guide you your first time using Couchbase Capella. So you can check out everything and kind of take a guided tour while you're here. So notice the 3 steps of the trial. We've got setup, which creates kind of the organization, project, assets. We're not going to worry about those too much today, but those are obviously important for managing clusters in production. The trial database, this is where the database itself actually gets deployed, and a sample data set is automatically loaded for trial users. We're going to use that sample data set today. And finally, the last step is upgrade, of course. When you want to start buying credits and using Capella in production, that's where you would want to go. The next thing I want to look at is these next step cards down here at the bottom. So the first one is explore data. That's going to take me right to a query editor to write some SQL. We'll click on that in just a minute here. Import data. We're going to be able to load your own data if you want to. The playground and the connect section here. Up here in the top in this nav, this might change as you go between clusters, but right now we're just looking at the nav has data tools, which we'll spend some time in today. Monitoring, which shows kind of memory usage and operations and latency, things like that. We're not going to spend any time on that today. Backup for backing up and restoring data. Again, not going to cover that today. And then settings, which contains lots of different configurations and changes you can make. We're going to spend some time in settings. I'm not going to cover that completely, but just on an as-needed basis. We're going to focus on the settings that a developer is going to care the most about. So let's go on to this first card here. Take the next step. We're going to explore data. Click on this. It goes right to the query tool. Let me clear out this history here. This is where I spend a lot of time when I work with Couchbase, just writing SQL here, making adjustments, changes, executing queries, making sure I get the right results. So this is obviously the first place to go when working with data, especially if you're familiar with SQL as a query language. Couchbase is a NoSQL document database, but it actually provides a full SQL implementation called SQL++. So in the query editor here, you can actually specify which bucket you want to run queries against and which scope. So the idea with buckets and scopes is similar to the relational world of database and schema. And inside of this scope, there are collections. So we can expand out the whole list here over in Data Insights. So travel sample is the bucket. Inside of that is a bunch of these scopes. I'm going to focus on the inventory scope today. And the inventory scope contains 5 collections. These are analogous to tables in the relational world. So this is kind of how you can see the lay of the land here when it comes to data. I'm going to go ahead and put in a SQL query. I'm just going to copy and paste. I want you to actually watch me type here. Zoom in a little bit on this. So this is going to be selecting some fields from the route collection. And we'll scroll down a little more to see that it's actually joining to the airline collection. So that's right. You can actually do a full SQL join between collections. I'm going to join the airline ID in the route collection to the key of the airline collection. So the meta ID over there is key. You're going to see more about metadata here in just a minute. But that is a really simple join query because I want to get the airline name that's not actually in the route. It's in the airline collection. So if I join between those two, I can actually pull in the airline name. I'll go ahead and execute this query, and you can see the results here are all JSON results, and airline name brought in for these first 10 is all Air France, which corresponds to airline 137. So there you go. That is the quick tour of the very first explore data card there. And you can keep going here if you want to just type in SQL queries. You can just do something a little more simple, like just select star from a collection and get those types of results. And you can get it advanced or as simple as you want to just kind of explore the data as it sits right there. So let's go back to the start page here. The next thing I want to look at is import data. I'm not going to go through the full steps of importing data because it does get a little tedious to do that and do all the settings and things like that. And there's full documentation for it, but I just want to kind of show the features here, what you might expect if you want to import data instead of the sample. So it does come with its own sample set of data, that travel sample that I just showed you. But if you want to bring in your own data, you're welcome to as well. So you can see we've got the import button here to import either from JSON or CSV. So I can start by choosing a bucket. I only have the one bucket right now, travel sample. This little wizard here, the import is going to go through. At this point, I got to start making decisions. Do I want to import JSON data or CSV data? I generally prefer JSON because CSV can get really messy sometimes depending on your source. And then you can choose, well, do I have a JSON lines? Do I have JSON list, like one big array? Do I have an archive, a zip file containing multiple JSON documents? These are all options. So I'll just click on lines here to show you a little more. Once we select lines, we're going to get a couple options on how do you actually want to upload that file. I can just drag and drop something right from my desktop into the browser here to upload. And for a smaller set, that's probably fine to do. But another option is you can actually click on this manually here. It'll give us a little curl string, a curl command that we can use to import data from from a local computer or from blob storage or S3 or something like that. And that's probably a better option for larger data sets, especially when you're actually doing a full proof of concept with your real sample data. So that's as far as I'm going to go with import data. You can see there's more steps to it. We have to define what collections the data goes into. If you have one collection or a lot of collections, how you're going to construct the key to each data, some other configuration options, and then the actual import data is the last step there. So that's import there. While I'm on the import screen, you can also see that the travel sample is available here. It's already imported. as you can see there at the bottom there. There's some other samples you can use that are available that are built into Capella. So one of them is beer sample. It's a little bit of a simpler data set. It contains, I believe, 2 things. So it's breweries and beers. But if you're really into beer, maybe this will be more fun for you to experiment with that. There's also, for the game developers out there, there's a game sim sample, which contains some sample data that's closer to the structure you might use in a game. Couchbase, we have a lot of gaming customers, game developers. So obviously it makes sense for us to have a sample. So that's the import data screen. Let's go on back to the Start Hub. Okay, next thing, I'm going to skip the playground actually, but just to plug it a little bit here, if you go to couchbase.live, you'll see the full-blown external Couchbase playground you can use without even signing up for Capella if you want to. The idea here is it's a bunch of code samples that are interactive ways to work with Couchbase without actually have to install anything. And those can be, and you can see those actually can integrate with Capella here as well. But the idea with this playground is to bring that experience right into the Capella UI. So if you want to check that out, you can go to the playground there. The last thing I want to check though is the connect card here. And this is where you're going to work with all the settings that you'll need to connect some sort of external application or integration to use Capella. Ideally your own code, right? So as you're writing code, you plug this information into your code to connect to Capella. So here's a connection string right here. If I wanted to open up Visual Studio, for instance, and write a .NET console app, I could use this connection string to connect to Couchbase. That's one of the things I need to connect. The other thing I need is I'm going to need to actually, most likely, you're going to want to allow some IP addresses in to work with Capella. So by default, Capella blocks everything from connecting to it. It's just secure by default, so that if you want to connect, say, your laptop or your desktop computer from your home address or your office or whatever, you'll need to go in and allow an IP address. Now you see I've already done this with my own IP address here, but just show you how this works. I can say, put my current IP address in there. I can change this to whatever else I want to do, if it's a different IP address, for instance. And I can also select how long do I want this to be allowed, permanently allowed or short term, longer term. Maybe you have a policy of, well, you can get allowed IP, but after a year it's up and you have to make another request to get that added, that sort of thing. I can also allow access from anywhere. And this is something of a dangerous thing to do potentially. So that's why you get this kind of very GitHub-esque warning message where you have to type in the word confirm to say, yes, I want to allow access from anywhere. Now, just to be clear, that's not anonymous access from anywhere. That's just the IPs that are allowed to try to connect to Capella. So we went back to this connection here. You can see I've already got my IP address allowed, so I can connect my .NET app or my Java app or whatever to this Capella trial and start coding with it. I do need one more thing though. We're going to go down here to the database access under security. So we've taken care of networking, but we need to actually allow access to the database as well. And right now there are no credentials, which means outside of this UI, nothing can connect to the Capella database. So I'm going to go ahead and create some database access. And it's a name and secret is what you'll need to start with. Now it's kind of like username and password, but these are meant for applications to connect, not people. So that's why we're calling it access name and secret. So I just pasted in a token there that I generated earlier. And I call this SVC New Year, New UI. So if I have an application that I want to connect, this is the credentials that I'll use along with that connection string I showed you earlier. And then I can specify what kind of access this actually has. So which bucket do I want to allow access to? Or maybe all buckets if I want to allow access to everything. Which scope within that bucket? Or again, I could select all scopes. And then what kind of access? Read or write, or read and write. So I could select all those different options there. I can add additional levels of access, assuming you have multiple buckets, multiple collections, and so on. And I'll create that database access. And there we go. Now it's listed in my database access. You can obviously add more of these as you need to. As you add more projects, more applications, you can keep adding more of these tokens to use. So that's the three things you need in the settings area to get started. You need to have the connection string, which is just something you can copy and paste. You need to set up an allowed IP address, and you need to set up database access token. Pretty standard, straightforward stuff there, but you can definitely see the new UI, the GitHub approach. Actually, if we click on delete here, you'll see even more GitHub-like interface. If I just want to delete that token, I can go ahead and delete it. I have to type in delete to confirm that, and there we go. Token's gone. Okay, so let's go back to our start hub. So I went through all these cards down here. Next, I want to look up at this nav here a little bit. We're going to skip some of those areas, but I want to go into data tools specifically. So this will take us right to the query, which we saw earlier. But I want to focus on the things beyond query that you can do with Couchbase. So this is Query Workbench. It's the first one in this kind of tertiary navigation here. But Couchbase is a truly not only SQL. Some people say not only is what the NO means in NoSQL, because there are other options to work with data beyond just SQL. So let's go ahead down to documents here. And this allows me to browse individual documents within collections. And this is not using SQL. It's actually using document keys. So if I wanted to, let's say, go into this document here, notice this is the key, the ID, airport underscore 1254. If I click on that, I can see the contents of the document. And that's all done with a key lookup. And that's how you would do it in your application as well. You wouldn't write a SQL query. You just say get and then this ID, and that would give you the document. Now, Couchbase has a memory first architecture. So likely this document will already be in RAM. So it's a very, very quick, low latency way to look up individual pieces of data when you don't need a full SQL query for multiple pieces of data. So here's the details of the document, just some standard JSON in there. Completely standard JSON is what Couchbase uses. In addition, there's this metadata over here. So this document has some metadata about it. If I zoom into that, you can see that the ID, the key of this document, is actually part of the metadata. It's not part of the JSON document. JSON is just pure standard JSON, and then some metadata to accompany it. So that's when you saw that keyword earlier that said meta. This is what we're talking about. Give us something in the metadata and specifically the ID. So that's how you could do a lot of joins based on the key. Okay, next thing is indexes. Just going on the list here. Indexes, just like in the relational world, these are used by the SQL++ engine for efficient queries. So let's click on one of these indexes. Let's try airport name here. And this will show us the index definition up there. So create index, very similar to the relational world. That's how you create an index there. Give it an index name. What bucket are we going to have this index on? What fields is it going to be indexing? So in this case, just the airport name field is going to be indexed. In addition to that index, you can also see how much this index is being used, how many items are being indexed, some of the performance metrics that are all available there. And if I want to modify or create a similar index, I can click on Open in Workbench. That'll take me right back up to this Query tab with this index pre-populated right there, so I can start making changes to it. If maybe I wanted to work on an alternate index, like airport name 2, I don't know, which has some other fields involved in it, that sort of thing. So that's one way you can work with indexes. It's just by going from the indexes view right back to Query Editor. So that's the indexes view. The travel sample data set comes with some indexes also predefined. So I didn't create these. These all came out of the box with that travel sample data. So lots of good examples here to show you how to build indexes, and you can see which parts of the data, which collections and scopes that these indexes belong to. Okay, next down on the list is search. So another way you can work with data in Couchbase. So we've talked about SQL, we've talked about key value. Next way is a search. So these are actually searches for text-based search or even geospatial search. If you want to search for something by its location on a map, latitude, longitude, a bounding box, a polygon, a radius, etc. So we can actually go ahead and create a search index. There are none that come with the travel sample, so we'll have to create one out of the box. I'm going to call it IX FTS, which is full text search, IX for index. I'm going to just name this _content. Select the travel sample bucket. And for scope, I'm going to stick with inventory. I'm going to open up advanced here a little bit. Don't panic. I'm not going to go into all these details here, but I'm going to add a type mapping because I want to focus in on one specific collection, which is landmark. So I'm going to hit and submit to that. And over in general settings, I also want to check this store dynamic fields. You're going to see why I'm checking that in just a second here, as soon as I start doing some searching. That's it. If you notice, there's index definition also being created here. So you can use this with your source control or CI/CD or whatever to create these indexes. You don't have to come to the UI every time to do that. Command line will also work there as well. So I'll create that index. So that index is being created. And it ran very quickly, so it didn't even have a second to show you the progress. It's 100% done, indexed 559 items. As new items come into that landmark collection, they will be automatically indexed by this full text search index, so you don't have to worry about making sure the index is up to date. I'll go ahead and click on shish kebab here and search. So now I can start using the index. And speaking of shish kebab and food, let's search for breakfast. It's lunchtime for me. I'm getting a little hungry. So maybe I'm searching for lunch instead. But if I search for breakfast, you can see all the landmarks will have will come up back as search results based on how well they match that query. So these are ordered by relevancy. So the most relevant results will be at the top of the list. And if you want to see all the scores for that, you can click on Show Score. It'll show you the breakdown of how it calculated that score, why it's on the top of the list. So you can see here, landmark 25459 has some breakfast keywords in multiple places. So that's probably why it ranks so highly. And so we can actually use full text search in combination with SQL if you need to. Another thing you can do, a neat trick, is you can take this key, go to Documents, and over to Landmark here, and I'll just paste that key right into there, and then I can do a full key value lookup on the entire document, not just the fields that are being searched. So you can see, here we go. Here's where we got breakfast and a couple of places and the document. There's the full document I can get to with a key value lookup. So we can use all these different methods, SQL query, key value lookup, and search. They can all be used in conjunction with each other. It's all the same pool of data. And you can do all these things right from Couchbase. Next on the list, analytics and eventing. I'm not going to cover those. They're actually not in the trial. You need to use the full version or download Couchbase Server to check those out. And we already covered import. So that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover in the UI. There are a couple other things that are I want to call invisible features of Couchbase Capella that are relatively new that I will also mention here because they are important things that just don't appear in the UI as things you can click on or show and tell. So I want to direct you to the Cloud Trust Center on the Couchbase website. This is all about security and certifications, and this talks about what our approach is to security and all the different compliances that we offer with Capella. So I encourage you, if these are important to you or your industry, please come to this website, check them out in detail. See what's there for HIPAA, see what's there for SOC 2 and PCI compliance, because for your industry these may be very, very critical. I mentioned single sign-in already. That's also part of security that I'm not really showing, but it is built into a Capella now as well. The other thing I want to talk about that is invisible, also available as an option in Capella, is the new Magma storage engine. Now up here is Couch Store. I believe that's what I was using in the demo. But Magma is another option that's available in Couchbase. This is a relatively new storage engine. Couch Store is actually a great engine for data sets that can fit mostly into memory. So it's very good performance with that. But of course, it does have high demands on memory, or if you have an extremely large data set, it's not going to be easy to fit that into memory. That's where Magma comes in. This is the latest storage engine. So these, to be clear, these are both options. Magma does not replace Couch Store. It's just another option. This is designed for very large data sets that's really not practical to fit into memory. So for example, if you have one node with 5 terabytes of data, Magma can be used with 64 gig of memory and still provide efficient data access. You can see some examples of it here, kind of comparing the two. minimums, quotas, the memory to data ratio, the max data you can have per node. So if you're in the area of very large data, Magma is something that Capella and Couchbase has added recently that can really help you. And I also mentioned that Magma will be a good choice if you have large data, or another possibility is if you make heavy use of highly durable transactions. So ACID transactions that you've turned up the durability on to be much higher, because that involves more disk access. So if your application is, say, a very transaction financial based application, you may want to explore using Magma if you're using a lot of ACID transactions. So that's kind of another invisible feature of Couchbase. It's hard to demo a very, very large storage engine in a UI, a quick UI demo, but I wanted to mention that because it is an important new feature of Couchbase Capella. So that's the quick tour of the new UI. Like all software as a service, like all database as a service, it is always a work in progress. So if you're watching this as a recording, there may be some things that are slightly different, different places. Maybe there'll be different cards down here depending on how you've signed up for your account. It might be different customizations, things like that. So it's always a work in progress. Just keep that in mind. Improvements, patches, fixes, these all happen continuously. And of course, that's one of the benefits of a database as a service compared to a traditional hosted model. It's less patching and bug fixes and deployments that you have to worry about. So if you're interested in trying this out for yourself, there is the link there in the Docs tab. Go to Couchbase/product/Capella. Sign up for a free trial. You don't need a credit card to do it. It's real easy, quick to get started. If you are using Capella and if you've got questions or need help, I would recommend checking out the Couchbase forums. That's forums.couchbase.com. And we also have a Discord available as well, Couchbase Discord. Just look on the couchbase.com site, do a quick search for Discord, and that should come up there. And you can get started with a live chat with other community members. So that is the tour. That is the UI tour. I'm just going to take a quick check to see if any questions have come in before we call it a day. I told you it was going to be quick. So I'm not seeing any questions yet. You still have time to get those in.
You did such a great job covering everything, Matthew. I think that's what that's telling you. But if you do want to add any questions, please do that now. Otherwise, you can add them in. We can and try to get somebody to come back to you if we're not able to answer your question.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining me today for this quick tour of Couchbase Capella.